we're going to apply what we've learned about confidence intervals for a mean to creating confidence intervals around a proportion. Like the confidence interval for a mean, the confidence interval for a proportion is the point estimate plus or minus a margin of error. And so it will look like this. We have our population proportion, which is greater than the lower limit of the range of proportions and less than the upper limit of the range of proportions. What kind of sampling distribution are we going to use for these proportions? Now you may recall that as long as two conditions are met, we can use a normal distribution, a z distribution, one in which we don't have to worry about degrees of freedom. As long as the conditions are n times p, sample size times the proportion is greater than or equal to 5, and sample size times 1 minus the proportion is greater than or equal to 5. In that case, we can use the normal distribution for our proportions as we estimate the confidence intervals. And we're going to do that using the Excel spreadsheet for the week 13, and we're going to go to the proportions tab. And here you will find the data that we have from the ICU, except I've created a different tab and we'll be creating another random sample and looking at the proportions. This time we'll be looking at the proportion of the patients in the ICU who passed away. So it's the expired variable. Let's begin by creating a random variable that we can use for sorting. So put your cursor in G2 and type $rand, open parentheses, close parentheses. That creates a random number between 0 and 1. Copy that random number to the rest of the column by clicking on G2 and double-clicking on the box in the lower right corner to copy it down. Now we have a random number assigned to every case. We can use that for sorting. Go to Data, Sort. You may get a warning. If so, notice that the default selection says expand to the selection. That's what we want. Click on Sort. This will open up the Sort box. We want to sort on the column Random. Sort on values, smallest to largest, and click OK. Now we have moved a random 30 cases to the top. That will be our sample. So let's look at the sample that I've created, which is going to be different than the sample that you have created because of the nature of randomness. Now in my example, which the results will look like your example, in my first example, I have a proportion that is fairly close to the population parameters. We can see how many patients expired over the total sample size, which will be 30. That's how we create the proportion. Our response of interest is 1. That can be changed if you wanted to, although not necessary for this example. And again, our alpha is 0.05, giving us a 0.95 confidence interval. Here are our sample values. For the z-value, standard error, margin of error, our point estimate is the same as the proportion. Our lower and upper limits are the range in which the population proportion will fall 95% of the time. We can get another sample by again going to Data, Sort, working through those steps again and sorting on that random variable. Now let's look at this next example, this next sample that we've drawn. We have a slightly different proportion. We will see that our upper and lower limits for our point, around our point estimate will change slightly. That is the randomization that is why 95% of these confidence intervals will capture the population proportion. However, just based on random chance, you may get a proportion that differs from the population value sufficiently that your confidence interval does not capture the population mean. And that's going to happen about 5 times out of 100 for our 95% confidence interval. So let's do it ourselves using an example from the homework. A national survey of 900 women golfers revealed that 396 of them were satisfied with the availability of tea times. Develop a 95% confidence interval estimate for the proportion of the population of the golfers satisfied with the availability of tea times. Now, the first thing that we need is our proportion. There were 396 out of 900 who were satisfied with tea times. That is a proportion of 0.44. We're going to use that as we go to the Proportions tab of the Intervals Week 13 Excel spreadsheet. Scroll down a little bit so we see the Do-It-Yourself box. We're going to enter two bits of information. For the proportion, enter a 0.44. And for the sample size, enter 900. The settings and the coefficients will change upon entering these values, and we will get our point estimate, which will be the same as our proportion, 0.44, as well as the lower and upper limits for our confidence interval around the proportion.